What's up, everyone? So I had a few people ask me to give my thoughts on the new Joker movie, due to the kind of psychological themes running through it and so on. And I only finally got around to watching it last night. It's just been that long to find a version in Czech Republic that isn't dubbed into weird Czech voices. So yeah, dark movie, interesting movie, fantastic acting. I've already seen some people kind of review it. They've looked at the nihilism sort of philosophy theme going through it. They looked at uh, the mental illness theme going through it. You know, people who aren't being treated and respected when they have mental illness. But you know what stood out to me the most that I haven't seen anybody else comment on is the theme of neglect. I guess everybody watches the movie in their own way. But for me, that was the core message or motif running through the whole movie, the concept of neglect and the rage that we build in response to being neglected. So there's kind of two stories of neglect running parallel through the movie. The first is obviously the Joker himself, the main dude. Spoiler alert, by the way, if you haven't watched it. So as we find out later on in the movie, he was severely neglected and abused as a child. And we can say that's almost certainly responsible for the mental problems he has as an adult, plus some genetic factors possibly. But oh no, he was adopted, wasn't he? Yeah. So anyway, so we see that the way he is, the carnage that he causes, and the damage that he does is a direct result of the rage that he feels around being neglected, which is now in his subconscious. He doesn't know why he feels rage anymore. He didn't remember what happened to him. He's only left with the rage, not the memory of the trauma, which is very symbolic and very relevant to many of us. Many of us have rage. I think all of us do. But we can't remember where it came from. We attribute it to things that are more recent. We say that person pissed me off, or I hate the government, or whatever. But the rage was there before all of those things, just waiting to be set off by triggers. And we've forgotten where it originally came from. And so often that original source is abandonment and neglect. Whether it's something small or relatively small, like being excluded from your peer group when you're in primary school. You know, the cool kids wouldn't talk to you, or they picked you last for the sports team, all the way through to severe abuse and trauma in your childhood, or just, not necessarily like negative attention like abuse, but just no attention, being neglected, ignored, emotionally distant from your parents. Many of us are filled with rage. We think it's about current things, but it's actually about that. That's where it began. The rage is a protective coping mechanism for the utter fear of being left alone when we're weak and vulnerable and unable to protect ourselves. There's a huge resentment that builds up, a lost confusion which easily turns into hatred and rage. So there's the story of the Joker, his neglect to rage story. And then there's the public, isn't there? So his followers who feel abandoned and neglected by the rich, the bourgeoisie, that old story. So we see that as it eventually accumulates up towards rioting and destruction and murder. We see how pissed off people are when they feel that they've been left behind, ignored, and neglected by the powerful people in society, which is really just a macro extrapolation of the micro of you being abandoned by your parents or your peers, being abandoned by your government. You know, we see that early on the Joker's funding gets cut for his mental health. We see that they kind of kill the rich movement that's going through the public in the movie. And for me, I think that's one of the reasons this movie pokes people right in the chest. You know, why people are so touched and moved by this movie. I've seen a lot of people saying that, weeks after they've seen it, they're still thinking about it. And they'd attribute it either to the nihilism, this kind of pointlessness theme that goes through the movie, or, the kind of the surface representation around neglecting mental health. Somebody needs mental health, not being treated properly and being left alone and so on. But I think what really stands out to us is the person who's left out and not taken care of when they needed it, and not treated well by those who are supposed to treat them well, those whose role it is to look after them. How we react with rage to that. And I think that's why it touches us, because one of the things we don't talk about very much is how full of rage we are as a species. This is one of the reasons I always loved heavy metal music, is because it's one of the few scenes, community-wise, where people are at peace with their rage. They go to the mosh pit, they bash against each other, they listen to music that's basically the audible equivalent of violence, and they kind of embrace that dark side. I was talking with a guy the other day. I was talking about how the band Korn kind of saved my life. I was so full of rage when I was like 12, 13. It wasn't just normal teenage angst. I was full of hate. And I could close the door, I could chuck Korn on to like maximum volume, and I would sing along to it as if I was Jonathan Davis. I imagined myself being on stage and blasting it out, and I'd get it out, and I'd purge the wound. I'd get all that sickness out of me and be able to function for another day. And I'd really struggle if I had to go for a long period of time without being able to listen to my metal, or having to listen to other types of music, which I found kind of offensive because they were just so fake in terms of emotion. At least that's the way I saw it, being a metal elitist as I was. And that's all kind of what I saw, is there's no really good output for that rage because we don't even know what the input is. There's a lot of people that are just full of anger. You see them on the internet trolls, and you can see it when the latest debate comes up, whether it's climate change or vaccinations, or the latest theme seems to be veganism. People just explode at each other over points that could easily be discussed rationally. They don't have to be emotive points. Differences in lifestyle that don't affect the other person. You can see it, say, somebody who rages against climate change activists. Even if you don't believe in climate change, what's wrong with somebody polluting less? Why would that make you angry? Why would that be so upsetting for you? You might like to eat meat. Why does a vegan upset you? They're not eating your meat, right? There's more for you, if anything. So why does them being different so upsetting? And that's a theme, isn't it, throughout society? As soon as we see something different, we generally have one of two reactions, either curiosity or fear. And a majority of us react with fear as a kind of first stop principle. Something's different, we feel threatened by it, and we behaved in a threatened way. You can see this with online debates very easily. Somebody goes, "This is my view," and somebody else goes, "No, fuck you." And rather than like, "Okay, have your view," or "Why do you believe that?" they go, "How can you believe it? You're a threat to me somehow." And they act with aggression or defensiveness. And you got to ask yourself, well, why? Why have that reaction to something that has, I can't see any way that it actually directly threatens you. And I've been guilty of doing this myself, and it's because we think that's where our rage is coming from. But the truth is, our rage is the fear of abandonment. Something happened when we were younger, something shocking, either a one-off event or a repeated pattern of abuse, pain, whatever it is. And there's this philosophical sense like, holy shit, like, people who are supposed to got my back, they don't. There's a threat there. I'm at risk of being hurt by others. And it's not long before we realize, or we come to the conclusion, that risk is represented by differences. If someone is significantly different to me, like if I'm the nerdy kid and they're the athletic kid, they're a risk just because they're different. And we learn this idea, difference is bad, difference is threatening. And so we react to difference with rage, because rage is the kind of insecure overcompensation for fear. It's like a false courage. When somebody's really afraid and they can't build up courage, what the brain will do as an override is outrage. Outrage can make someone do something courageous, though it's not real, like healthy anger. It's an explosion. It usually leads to such an overcorrection that you do something that's even more harmful than being a coward. You know, like somebody who's been picked on and bullied all their life, turning around stabbing the bully and becoming the bully. So anyway, so those are the themes that I saw in the Joker, and that's my theory as to why it hits home with people so much. It's because so many of us are fucking angry, and we don't know why. We think we do. We think it's something recent. We think it's life and the government, and we think it's Trump, and we think it's climate change. We think it's veganism. We think it's immigration. We think it's all these things, but really what it is somebody did something very fucking awful to you when you were younger. Something perhaps subtle, like guilt tripping you, not including you in the group, treating your brother better than they treat you, whatever it was. And that's where your rage comes from. You do with that kind of synopsis what you will. I've got no advice for you. It's just my thoughts on it. And it just reminded me, so many of the clients that I coach, this is ultimately at the heart of their problems, their victimization, their blame and outrage towards the world was caused from genuinely painful events that they've extrapolated and now they've forgotten. Or at least they don't realize that that's the connection to the present day outrage and fear and loathing. Yeah, so that's my thoughts. And it was brilliant acting, if I haven't said that already. Fucking fantastic acting. Excellent stuff. Christ, how much weight did he lose? Anyway, I'll see you guys next time. I feel like ranting. Peace.